So last night the fleet entered into a front, so the front was coming from the west, moving towards the east, with very strong southwesterly winds ahead of the front, and then a big wind shift. And all this happened while the boats were dealing with the Gulf Stream, which is a very strong current. And so when you put the strong winds and the current, it makes very big waves. And so the conditions were very tough and very, very rough for the boats. When you come from the south, you have to cross the Gulf Stream because it comes from the west and it goes all the way to the Azores in the east. And you have to choose or to pick up the best place to cross it. You have eddies in the Gulf Stream, so like little circles of current, and a big main flow of current. And they chose to cross on one of those eddies, and then at the end they had to cross the main flow, which the leaders just did this morning. So the fleet download the models with the current, so they know more or less where the current is going to be. And then from there, they take this into account in their routings. And the goal is to cross the Gulf Stream where you have the less current or the most favorable current, but also to avoid the places where the current is going to be opposite to the wind. Because if the current and the wind face each other, then the waves are going to be even bigger. The forecast in those regions is quite good for the average wind, but when you get close to the Gulf Stream, you have warm water, cold water just next to it, and so it creates a lot of instability, and this is not well seen by the model. So you can have gusts or very strong winds for very short periods, which are much stronger than what the models will give you. And so the Gulf Stream is a very warm current coming from the Gulf of Mexico along Florida, and then it crosses the Atlantic. The water is about 27, 28 degrees offshore Florida. When it gets to Europe, it gets cooler, around 20 degrees. But it still gives a very mild climate on the western coast of Europe. Mainly the winters would be colder without the Gulf Stream. To assess the evolution of the Gulf Stream, we need data on a long-term basis, and today we just have data on the last few years because the satellites couldn't measure the Gulf Stream before. And so it's a little too early to say that it's changing. It might have changed before, and we didn't know about it. But we know that there is a climate change. We know that it's going to affect the Gulf Stream. But how it affects it today, it's difficult to say. Some skippers have sailed quite often in the Gulf Stream because they sail the Newport to Bermuda race every year or every 2 years. But some of them have never sailed in this region before. And so the first time you get in the Gulf Stream, even though you've read about it and your weather router tells you about it before the start of the race, then when you get in it, you're always surprised by the wind changing very rapidly and the gusts you get and all what happens in a very short time.